Hello, Nate.
Hey, Greg. Welcome once again, everybody. We are back after a long wait. In our defense, May is a really tough month to get anything done here for the birding
Well,
organization.
no, it's really
So
hard
please
for us to
forgive
do
us.
things. It's really hard for us to do things like this, where we have to be together at the same time
That's
because
true.
we're all
That's
over
the
the
big thing.
place.
Yeah, we've had quite a month here at the American Birding Association. We'll talk a little bit about that first. But first, welcome everybody who's watching on all of our various streams. We've actually added a stream this time. We are on Facebook in the What's This Bird group. We are on the ABA's YouTube channel. You can find us at American Birding Association. We are on Twitter at ABA. We're also on Twitch now. Twitch is a thing. If you are
Look at us
interested,
being cool
look
kids.
at us. Look at us being gamers. We currently have one person
Exactly.
watching. So it takes time to build a following. Anyway,
I've got my
welcome once
gamer
again,
chair
guys.
all set here.
Welcome once again, everybody. What we do here on this "What's This Bird" live program is that we here at the American Birding Association have a bunch of communities that we sort of maintain, mostly on Facebook, with bird identification, and it's basically a crowdsourced bird identification group. If you're in it right now, hello. People post their photos of birds, their images, their movies, their audio clips, and they get those photos identified. But we do frequently have some issues, some bird identification conundrums that we'd like to talk through every once in a while, and that's what we will be doing here in this
Yep.
spot. We try to come to you every other week or so, but it has been a while for reasons that Greg, do you want to jump into the big things that have been going on at the ABA that have prevented us from doing a What's This Bird live in an entire month, besides the birding, obviously?
I do, but first I want to say hi to Calvin, Donna, Sergio, Mia, Lisa, Donna, and everybody else that's chimed in and said hi in the Facebook chat there. So yeah, as Nate says, we've been really busy, and part of the reason we're so busy is because this is one of our
Five reasons.
five reasons exactly. But one of the reasons we've been so busy is that there's a lot of young birder stuff going on in the spring. And one of the things we'd like to bring your attention to is the 2022 ABA Young Birders of the Year.
Congratulations,
If you're not,
Reed Robinson and Zeta Robertson. Don't get them mixed up. They have
yes,
different last names. Reed is from Portland, Maine, and Zeta is from, was it Canton, Missouri?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
And no, go ahead, Nate.
I was going to say our Young Birder of the Year program is this basically a year-long mentorship program where young birders take part in a number of different, what we call modules. There are different aspects of birding that they're judged on by a number of different mentors: writing, photography, illustration, conservation, and community. You can check it out on our website, aba.org/, Young Birder of the Year. Is that what it is? Young Birder of the Year. In any case, it's a year-long whole process wherein these young birders submit all these modules, and they are adjudicated by our group of amazing birders that are around the country, some of which are some of the leading lights in the birding community. And Reed Robinson and Zeta Robertson they were judged to be the best of the young birders this year. But thanks so much to everybody that took part. It's a really gratifying effort for the American Birding Association to provide this mentorship program, and also to help these kids out along on their birding career.
Absolutely, and it's they submit their work. They can, as Nate mentioned, there's I believe 5 different modules, and they submit their work and are helped through it. And then the mentors, who are some of the leaders in field biology, field ornithology, writing, photography, art, help them through the process and get them to this end point. And it's one of the programs that's really important because we're building conservationists of the future through the birding community. And one of the things we like to say around here is that a world with more birders is a better world. And these young people, they get this sense of caring about the natural world and about birds in particular, and then go on to do greater things. And I'm reminded of what Dan Jansen told me back in the 90s when I started doing conservation work in South America. Dan is one of the most famous, he's called the father of tropical conservation. And he said, the way to effectively conserve a place or a species is to find that one person who has made that one thing their life's work, and then fund the hell out of them, and then do it again and again and again. And I feel through these programs, what we're doing is we are growing those one persons. We are sparking these people and sending them off into the field to do their work and find their passion. And if you look through the rosters of the organizations like Cornell and eBird and American Bird Conservancy and some of the ecotourism companies and field biologists, you will find many names that are ABA Young Birder alumni that are now adults doing incredible work.
Yep, that is absolutely true. Yeah, our Young Birder programs is, as I said, one of the most gratifying things that we do at this organization. And, so many of the people who are my age and younger have been involved in Young Birder programs throughout the lifespan of the ABA. I was a Young Birder scholarship recipient to go to a Young Birder camp back in the mid 90s. And look where I am now, talking to you all on the internet about birds.
Yes, and right now we are running what we call our nesting season appeal. It's one of our major fundraising drives of the year, and we are specifically here supporting the ABA Young Birder program and all of the aspects of the Young Birder program, from everything from scholarships to our summer camps, the Young Birder of the Year program, and so on. So go over to aba.org/gift, push those buttons, and send us some very much needed cash to make these things happen, because we rely on you. And this is certainly a program that gives back in a very big way.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Greg. And as you can go to abc.org/give and take care of that. Another thing that happened is we have a new president. I feel like or another executive director. I feel like we should acknowledge that as well.
We should.
Announced at the biggest week in American birding earlier this month, Nikki Belmonte, formerly of Georgia Audubon, Atlanta Audubon Society, now the executive director of the American Birding Association. Congratulations, Nikki. Welcome to this unruly mob. We do the best we can promoting birding and birds and young birders and all that stuff. So thanks to everybody. Welcome on behalf of everybody here. Welcome, and I'm sure we all will, give a hearty welcome to Nikki. She's doing great things already.
Absolutely. Well, should we dive into some birds here?
Yeah, let's do the birds. As I said before, what usually happens on this spot is, in the ABA, what's this bird? You can usually tell what season it is by what birds people are asking about. We get a lot of similar sorts of things year in and year out. A lot of the birds that people have questions on or see are seasonal. And so, what we try to do is focus on a few of those and talk through some of those identifications. Hopefully you can get some tips that you can take with you out into the field. So without any further ado, actually one more further ado. I will say
you're always doing it, man. You're always doing it.
Yeah. Just to do it. And if anyone has any comments, questions, anything like that, please let us know in the comments of whatever web streaming service that you are watching this on. We're happy to take a little bit of a tangent and talk about what's on your mind, as long as it has to do with birds at this moment. So please feel free to do that. But let's jump into these shorebirds, Greg, because they are on the shore.
They're on the shore. That's for sure. So yeah, we have some kind of fairly nondescript, kind of leggy birds running in the sand on a beach in Sonora, Mexico. They don't have thin sandpipery bills or long curlewy bills.
No.
The things that we see here, besides the kind of drab coloration, is the bill shape and the kind of legginess of them. So what are we?
long gray legs, all over sort of gray plumage, lighter on top, or lighter on the bottom than it is on top, and that short baton kind of shaped bill that you see a bird like that on a beach, and you're looking at a plover or plover,
Yes.
depending on how you pronounce it. Either one is correct.
I mix it up just to mess with people.
Yeah, as do I. I find that the Charadrius plovers, which are the little ringed plovers when they have black marks around their neck and on their face, I call plovers. And then the big pluvialis birds, which are sort of the larger plovers that are longer, leggier, longer winged, sort of plain this time of year, are plovers. I forget which one, but sometimes I see you can't even keep the track. So, we have a handful of these pluvialis plovers here in North America. Even though this photo was taken in Sonora, Mexico, this is a bird that a lot of people across the continent are seeing right now.
Yep.
Anytime you go out to a shore or a mudflat or something like that. We've narrowed it down to pluvialis, which there are 4 species in North America, regularly occurring in North America, 3 golden plovers and 1 black-bellied plover. That's gray plover to our old world friends who may be watching in the evening.
Yep. And the thing that as you said at the beginning there, the thing that stands out is the size and shape of the bill here. Most of our plovers have rather dainty bills. They're either short, some of the smaller ones are bicolored, but there's really only 2 that have kind of a big, kind of a crab-eating looking bill like this bird, and that would be Wilson's plover and black-bellied plover.
And they're 2 different genera.
Yep.
As we talked about here, one of them is the Charadrius, which is the banded plovers. That is the Wilsons, and of course, black-bellied plover is the pluvialis. So, yeah.
Which is what these are. These are black-bellied plovers on their way north to the Arctic to make more black-bellied plovers.
Only black-bellied during a relatively brief time of the year. They're not yet though. They usually don't turn into those really sharp-looking, silvery-backed, all black across the bottom until they reach their breeding grounds.
Yeah.
We had one in my county just this week, and it is still looking like this. Still looking like a gray plover.
We had one in northern Illinois that was in full breeding plumage, and people were taking time out of their day to go see it, even though it's a relatively common bird, because as you point out, seeing them in that kind of plumage is not common outside the breeding grounds. And one other thing to point out here is you look in the field guides, they'll point out, some field guides will point out that golden plover has a darker cap than black-bellied, and that's kind of subjective. Really get familiar with the bill size and the structure of these birds. Black-bellied plover is a beefy bird. It's a heavy bird.
Chunky.
compared to any of the golden plovers. Really, even the Pacific golden plover, which kind of gets kind of leggy and the bill's a little bit bigger, but not like this.
Yeah, for sure. And if you ever see these birds,
did you say for sure?
For sure. Yeah, I think we've really worn that. Out.
Time to move on.
Anyway, I was going to say that if you ever see these birds on a beach or on a mudflat with other shorebirds, they are very large. Pluvialis plovers are large compared to peeps. They're large compared to the Charadrius plovers. They're the only things that are really bigger than them are godwits and curlews, which you don't frequently
and
see.
Willets.
Willets
and
too.
Willets are big gray shorebirds with big honking bills, but the bills are much longer than any of the plovers.
Indeed. All right, moving on to this bird in North Dakota. This is not a shorebird, Greg. This
definitely not
a shorebird. It is a
This is a shrub.
Bird.
This is a shrub borb.
Shrub borb. Yeah. So what we're looking at here is a perching bird. Some things that stand out. It's got a relatively narrow bill, though it does look a little broad. That's more the angle than anything else. I think it's clear that what we've got here is a relatively thin top to bottom, I should say, Bill. Not a lot in the way of field marks other than this sort of all over yellowishness.
Ding, ding, ding.
It does seem to appear to have an eye ring. That's an interesting thing. But yeah, dark bill, dark legs, all over yellow, no wing bars, no other markings other than the yellow, means that it is the most yellow of the warblers. The
yellow warbler.
There's a lot of yellow warblers. There's only one yellow warbler.
Exactly. And one of the key things here that I like this picture is that it shows the underside of the tail is yellow. All of the other warblers that it might be confused with in this plumage have black and white markings on the underside of the tail.
Absolutely
and
right.
Yellow warbler is yellow.
Yeah, there's a lot of inappropriate names in the wood warbler family. Magnolia warbler, very infrequently found in magnolias. Connecticut warbler, quite rare in Connecticut, ironically. But the one that is the best named is the yellow warbler. It is the yellowest warbler.
So here's another borb.
Location.
The person forgot to put the location, and those of you who use the What's This Bird group, please remember to include date and location, because that really does help with a lot of
it does help, especially with this bird, actually.
Yeah, but
because there was a confusion species that is very range restricted, but and I don't think it is that. But
no,
if
it's not.
We might be a little confused. But if you're looking at this photo, you might be, you'd be justified to think that this is a very similar bird to the one we just looked at.
Sure.
Right. So the yellow warbler we just saw is a small perching bird with dark legs and a dark, narrow bill. It's got all over, not much in the way of field marks. It's got a white eye ring or an eye ring. This bird has all those things, but there is one thing that this bird doesn't have, that the yellow warbler does not have, that this bird has, and that's wing bars. So it's got two wing bars there, and it's got quite a lot of yellow in the flight feathers. So that is not a photo artifact. There is a lot of yellowish green in those flight feathers, Greg.
Yeah, and looking again, the thing that's right front and center is the wing panel that we can get a very good look at here. And it's obvious from the size of the leaves and the berries that this is a tiny little bird. And there's a lot of small green birds like flycatchers and vireos and warblers and things that look kind of similar to this. But, we look at that wing panel, and the wing panel is kind of unique to one family that we have here in North America. And that's the kinglets. And what is unique about it is that we can see up at the far right edge of the wing panel just the hint of the upper wing bar there, and then, of course, the stronger lower wing bar. But then immediately below that, there is a black bar that separates the green primary and secondary edges, and that is unique to kinglets.
Yep. This is certainly a kinglet. They have, they're one of our smallest perching birds for sure. And I can just imagine, I know this is not a video, but I can imagine if it were, that this little thing would be flicking its wings like crazy, because that is a thing that kinglets do all the time. Now, there is a confusion species. I did sort of suggest that early on. And it helped. This one of the reasons why it helps to know where this photo was taken. Out in the West, primarily in California, there is a kinglet lookalike called the Hutton's Vireo, and it in almost all of its plumages looks very much like a ruby-crowned kinglet. It is a Vireo rather than a kinglet, so it is a little bit chonkier, a little bit bigger. It's got a bigger bill. It's got gray legs as opposed to black legs, which is a useful field mark. Remind me, Greg, does Hutton's Vireo have that wing pattern, or is that a kinglet-only thing? It does not.
That is a kinglet-only thing.
So that is a way that you could, tell Hutton's Vireo from ruby-crowned kinglet. Hutton's Vireo kind of flicks its wings a little bit too. It's kind of a kinglet mimic.
It is a kinglet mimic, yeah. I have no idea what evolutionary advantage that is, but
there's got to be something. Yeah. So that's why it's always useful to put the name. Not that we would not be able to identify this bird as a ruby-crowned kinglet, but if it turned out that this photo was taken in, say, I don't know, San Diego, then we'd have to sit and think about it just a little bit longer. But otherwise, it is very clear that this is ruby crowned kinglet, good bird to be seen. Actually, they're out of here by now. Where I live in the southeast. They're gone.
There's still a couple around, but yeah, they're on their way out.
They have a really amazing kind of explosive song that you can hear this time of year. I love singing ruby crowned kinglets.
They do, and explosive is a really good word for that song because you don't expect it. You track down this song and you
ramp it up,
and you don't expect it to come from that little of a bird.
Yeah, it is a good song, sort of like in the wren story of small birds that have unexpectedly loud and complex songs. Spring Hill, Kansas. Yep. And so if you can't see it, the bird... I was going to say, is there a bird here, Greg?
Yes.
I can't tell.
The bird is just off center on the big limb there. You can see the kind of blobby looking thing sitting lengthwise on the branch, which is a clue right there. That's a major clue as to what family of birds we're looking at.
Yeah, lengthwise, it's actually trying to look like a bowl on that branch, not a B-O-W-L, but a B-O-L-L. Yeah, sitting lengthwise, no apparent legs, very long wings. You can see the wings sticking out well beyond the body. Flat head, tiny bill, cryptic coloration. It looks like a piece of wood or a
big eye
or something. Big eye. I don't know. Can you see the eye here? I don't know if I can see the
eye.
Oh,
yeah, I can make it out.
A little bit.
It's the eye's halfway open, but tiny little bill.
Yeah, this is that fantastic group of birds known as goatsuckers or nightjars.
Caprimulgids. Yeah.
Caprimulgids.
Now, one thing we can see on this bird is the wings, and as you pointed out, it has very long wings that reach the end of the tail, pretty much. It's also got a little white kind of bar, a little slash on the base of the primaries there, where the dark primary feathers.
A little bit of white in the wings.
And it's got some white in the wings. And those three things, the fact that it's in Kansas and that it has those long wings with the white slash and the overall gray coloration, this is a common nighthawk.
Common nighthawk, correct. This is probably the most likely caprimulgid, most likely goatsucker that most birders in North America will encounter, except maybe in the Southwest where you have lesser nighthawks as well. Yeah, they fly around at night catching big winged insects. They fly. I shouldn't say they don't just fly around at night. They fly around at dusk, which is the main reason people tend to see them. The other caprimulgids, which are also migrating right now, are things like whippoorwill, chuckwill's widow. These are much larger birds. They don't have the boomerang wing, those long pointed wings. Their wings are a bit shorter, and they don't like to sit on branches very often. I don't know if I've ever seen. Well, I have, but not like this.
Not
they
like
tend
this.
to not like this. Yeah, they tend to be on the ground itself among leaf litter, where they expect their camouflage.
And it's interesting that whippoorwills and chuckwills widows, they tend to sit more normally crosswise on a branch.
Yeah, right.
They tend to perch down a little bit lower. The nighthawks uniquely. Now that doesn't mean that a whippoorwill can't. I think I have seen one or two whippoorwills perched lengthwise on a branch, but that is a thing that is, nighthawks almost always do that when they're perched in trees.
When I was in the biggest week in American birding earlier this month, there was a nighthawk that was perched up in one of the big cottonwoods near the Maggie Marsh boardwalk, and a lot of people were getting really nice scope views of that thing. We don't see them perched all that often, but it seems like when you do, it's out in Kansas or Wyoming. I've seen them perched in Wyoming. Maybe it's just because there aren't that many trees and they're a little easier to find. Or,
I'm in Metro Chicago, and I've seen one perched lengthwise on a wire in the over my backyard.
Wow, that's wild. Yeah,
they will set down wherever daylight finds them and try to blend in as best they can.
Heidi McCulloch notes in the Facebook comments there are common poorwills in western Kansas. Especially in the southwest part of the state. But Spring Hill isn't that far west. Thank you for that geography. We're never exactly sure, precisely where these places are. A lot of times it doesn't matter all that much, but it's always nice to know. Spring Hill, it looks like, oh, it's in Johnson County. Oh, it's near Kansas City, just west of Kansas City. So pretty far east, actually.
Yeah. Look at this.
Pinellas, Florida. That's
which is anywhere in
St.
Florida is where you would
Petersburg, Tampa
expect
Bay.
a scene like this.
Yeah, pretty wild. So what we've got here are 3 wading birds. All have long necks, long legs, and we have 3 different species right here, 3 different birds.
We do.
But as Greg is going to point out, there's something wacky going on with the I don't know, the foreshortening, the angle, the something, because it's messing with my brain.
It's messing with your brain. And this is something that happens with big telephoto lenses in particular. Big telephoto lenses that do not have, that are like 5.6, 5.8. So the smaller cameras, especially some of the point and shoot type cameras. So all 3 of these birds are easily and immediately identifiable. We've got a reddish egret in the front. We've got a little blue heron on the right, and we have a snowy egret in the back. And the snowy egret is a slam dunk snowy egret. It's got a black bill. It's got yellow lores. It's got the little crest coming off the back and the little little flippy do coming off the back of the wings there. There was another picture that clearly showed the yellow feet. But what's really kind of mind-blowing about this picture is that snowy egret and little blue heron are exactly the same size.
Yeah,
and
I've
the
even
reddish
seen
egret,
some where the little blue heron, just by virtue of how they move compared to a snowy egret, actually even look a little bit bigger.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're a little chunkier.
Yeah.
Snowy egrets are real slim, but the reddish egret is a substantially larger bird. I'm looking here in Sibley. Reddish egret is 30 inches long and weighs a pound. Little blue heron is 24 inches long and weighs 12 ounces. And snowy egret is 24 inches long and weighs 13 ounces. So what's happening here is kind of a forced perspective thing where birds in front can actually be made, well, it's really hard to explain, but what's happening here is sort of a forced perspective thing. Google that, and there's all kinds of articles about this phenomenon. But it really can mess people up, especially as when we were talking before we went on the air here, like a flock of gulls where you've got herring gulls in the front and a ring-billed gull in the back that actually looks bigger because of this optical illusion.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But I will say one of the things about this photo that I do like is that the reddish egret and the little blue heron are more or less in exactly the same pose.
Yep.
So you get a really nice comparative look at these 2 birds, which some people, when they're not standing right next to each other, and the difference in size is as apparent as it, maybe not quite as apparent as it is in this image, but apparent nonetheless. Those can be kind of confusing species sometimes, but you can absolutely see in the front bird, the reddish egret, that gray body, that kind of cold gray body, and the maroon head and neck, and obviously the very strong 2-toned bill there, compared to the little blue heron, where it is more of a purpley blue neck and almost more of a greenish body. It's a subtle difference, obviously, but it's there. It's pretty significant. You can see it right there. I think those colors, if the sizes are not necessarily appear true, the colors do appear true.
Absolutely.
In this image, at least.
Oh,
Iceland.
Look, a seagull. Look at that.
Yeah. Indeed. So though this photo was taken in Iceland, in the North Atlantic, this is a bird that birders on both coasts could potentially encounter this time.
This is a
year.
common bird offshore on both of our coasts. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you would be justified if you were looking at this photo and immediately think gull, seagull, whatever. It's got the classic white head, white body of the seagull. It's got the darker mantle. It's not super. By mantle, I mean the upper part of the main body there. There are a few things that do not look like a gull, though, and we can start with the mantle. Let's start with the lesser known one, perhaps. Most gulls tend to have very long wings. They tend to have a little bit of white in the wingtips a lot of times, little white dots in the primaries, and this bird does not have that at all. But man, there's something wonky.
There is. Well, that's what I was going to say. There's something, you look at it and it's like, oh no, wait. There's something a bit wonky about it, and it's the overall structure. This is a compact, heavy, kind of bull-headed,
head, thick neck. Yeah.
THICC. This is a thick bird. And most gulls, I mean, all of our gulls for the most, they don't look like this. They tend to be a little more gracile, a little longer necked, a little longer billed.
Definitely
they don't look heavy like this. And then look at that bill. It looks like it's got something stuck to the top of it.
Yeah, it's
looks
short
weird.
and squat, and I think it's a bit, it's shorter than you'd expect a gull bill, and it's got that weird ornament on the top. It looks like someone cut a little bit of a straw and glued it to the top of the bird's bill. It's a tube. Which is not to put too fine a point on it, puts this bird in the Procellariformes, which are the tube noses, which are a family of almost entirely pelagic ocean-going birds, which includes some of the more famous ocean birds like albatrosses, shearwaters, storm petrels, prions, some really weird, wacky ones, and of course this bird, which is a Fulmar.
Northern Fulmar.
Fulmar. I believe they probably breed in Iceland. I know they breed in Atlantic Canada and Scotland. I imagine they breed in Iceland as well.
And if you are, again, still on the Google from the last time we told you to go check Google up what that tube is used for, because it's fascinating. Yeah. It basically allows them to drink seawater.
Yeah, obviously when you are an ocean-going bird, you do not encounter freshwater practically at all. So you have to have some adaptations that allow you to drink seawater, which, of course, for most organisms would absolutely kill you.
Yes.
So what they do is that they drink the seawater, and then they have an organ inside their nose that effectively like filters out the salt, and it kind of goes out those little tubes in their noses. Like the salt kind of leaks out the little tube noses and is evacuated, and thus they can drink seawater, which is just an absolute bonkers adaptation that if you didn't, I don't know, it's just super weird.
Nature always finds a way.
Nature finds a way. Otherwise, there would be no way for an animal to live. To have this to live, in an open ocean like this. Yeah, there are lots of cool different tubes. If you look at like albatross tubes are different than Fulmar tubes, are different than storm petrel tubes, are different than shearwater tubes, but they all have that. They all have something like that. Albatrosses are so big that they have like double tubes on each little side of their bills. It's really, really very cool. Oh, the dreaded back of camera image, our bane in the What's This Bird group, Greg.
Yep. If you can take the time to actually upload the real picture rather than a picture of the back of your camera, we prefer that. But having said that, we can identify this bird from the BOC. And, again, looking at the image, we can see leaves, we can see branches. So we get an idea that this bird is pretty small. It's pretty plain. Doesn't really have a long tail. It's kind of whitish underneath. Maybe we see a little green. It's hard to tell. But what we can see are the face pattern and the bill. And, we saw a couple of small greenish birds, yellowish birds earlier, and the bills were similar but smaller than this one.
Narrower, for sure. Excuse me.
And so that's one clue, and the face pattern here is another. So what do we got here, Nate?
Yeah, so the things that are sort of standing out to me, as you say, Greg, the kind of greenish wash along the sides, the chest, and around the back of the bill, the very dark eye line, and the very dark line on the cap. So this bird looks like it has a dark cap, but even with that dark cap, there is like a brow that is even darker still, and then obviously the white line between the eye line and the brow line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is the thick bill, the perching bird. This is sort of narrows us down to vireos.
Mm-hmm.
So vireos are a family of perching birds that are quite commonly moving throughout the moving around or migrating right now. And this is actually one of the more common ones that breeds throughout the eastern half of the United States. So if we're looking at vireos that have that sort of pattern, that strong dark eye line, there are really only two that you would expect to see in Manistee, Michigan, and that is the Philadelphia vireo and the red-eyed vireo. So Philadelphia vireo is generally a much yellower bird, kind of yellow all over, and it has a very cute expression. I don't know if there's any other way to sort of, I don't know how else to sort of describe it. The bill is relatively shorter. The head is sort of round. It looks like a plush toy version of a red-eyed vireo, which is what this bird is.
Yes.
The other vireo with the strong black eye line, and luckily enough, one of the most common singing birds in the eastern United States this time of year throughout the warmer months.
Yeah, if you hear a bird in the woods that sounds kind of like a lazy robin up high in the trees, that's probably either a scarlet tanager or a red-eyed vireo.
Yeah, they have a three note pattern. I want to say that it's three notes, but actually it's a bunch. It's like these little kind of evenly spaced 3 and 4 note phrases that are just kind of constantly going on for as long as the bird is willing to sing. Sometimes it's half an hour or so.
And there are those robin-like songs. So you've got American robin, you've got several species of vireos, you've got tanagers, you've got rose-breasted grosbeak. All these birds sound very similar.
So similar. How can you tell?
And this is a really good time for us to mention our favorite app for learning bird songs, which is Larkwire.
Larkwire.
You got to get Larkwire and use the game, and you go right into the robin-like songs, and you get all of those, and you go back and forth and you play. You got to try it. Larkwire rocks.
Yeah, it's a little bit expensive for an app, but don't think of it like an app. Think of it like a tool that you're using to learn bird songs. And it's makes it into a game. It's really fun. There was one question we have before we move on, Greg. And the YouTube stream, someone asked warbling vireo, and that is another common eastern migrant. Western migrant too, for that matter. So those two might be different species, and neither here nor there. Warbling vireo is another vireo that you might encounter out in the woods this time of year, but warbling vireo has a very plain face. So we're looking at this bird, and you can see that very strong eye line that goes from the base of the bill all the way back beyond the eye. Warbling vireo is never going to have an eye line that is that strong. And that, in fact, the whole pattern is going to just be totally washed out. And the lore itself, the area between the eye and the bill, is going to be completely white. So it's going to make the whole face look like it's wide-eyed, more open, just pale in general. And in fact, the bird itself is more of a grayish green than in a kind of a very vivid kind of limey green that the red-eyed vireo can be on the sides and on the body. In fact, red-eyed vireo, the scientific name is Vireo olivaceus. Both of those words, Vireo olivaceus, are referring to green. So it is like the green bird.
Yes, and if we saw the back of this bird, as Nate said, it'd be very green. Scott Heron asks if Larkwire is only on iOS. I don't know, but if you go to larkwire.com, you can find out quickly.
Indeed. Christopher Pegasus says last time I checked, yes. So it is only you might be able to do it online too on a browser as well. In addition to if you're not able to get it on your phone. Bryce Remsburg asks, are there any programs, podcasts planned in the Midwest, specifically in Kansas? Funny you ask. I was actually in Kansas last month at a bird festival. Maybe I didn't do a very good enough job promoting that. At the Lesser Prairie Chicken Festival, I would encourage anyone who lives in that area to check that out because Lesser Prairie Chickens are amazing, and the festival is very well run, especially for it being its very first year. So, nothing right now.
And as Nate said at the beginning, those of you who just tuned in here, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to talk about, drop it in the chat or the comments, whether you're on Twitter or on Facebook or in YouTube. We can see you guys. So if there's something you want to talk about, drop it in there, and we are happy to break off for a moment or two and talk about what you want to talk about.
Absolutely.
As long as it pertains to birds.
Twist our arm to talk about birds. We're happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. I kind of lost track of where we are. There we go.
We got a couple more. Don't worry. Oh my. Okay. New Hampshire. This is I think I'm not going to kid around. It's pretty obvious what this bird is if you're familiar with North American birds. It is very tiny. It has a very long, skinny bill. There's really only one group of birds it could be, and that is hummingbirds. Greg, they are so unique that it's almost impossible to sort of beat around the bush and talk about why this is not a duck, or a falcon, or a horned screamer.
But Ted would go there.
Yeah, this is a hummingbird. It is apparently a quite small bird with a very long, thin bill for drinking nectar out of flowers.
Now, part of the reason I picked this picture is because it was taken in New Hampshire, and the person asked what species it was and suggested Anna's hummingbird. And one of the things we try to get across here in asking where these birds are seen is status and distribution is a really important thing to know when trying to identify birds. And there is only one hummingbird species that is regular and expected in New Hampshire, and that's the ruby-throated hummingbird. Now, hummingbirds are notorious vagrants.
Anna's included.
Anna's included, and Anna's is one of the most notorious of the vagrants. And there's a lot of interesting things going on with hummingbirds because hummingbird feeders have become so popular that the vagrants are finding food wherever they go at almost any time of year, which is I think it's a fascinating thing to study. But we can also identify this bird by the tail shape. We know that it is not an Anna's by this forked tail. It's very strongly forked tail. And Anna's has a more fan-like flat across the bottom tail.
And it's worth noting that it's only the male of the ruby-throated hummingbirds that has this deeply forked tail. The females have that fan-shaped tail. It's sort of interesting. And also, Anna's hummingbird has sort of the gorget, the kind of shiny feathers around the throat, kind of go up on the crown as well on an Anna's hummingbird. Where in this bird, you can pretty clearly see that those dark feathers and the gorget they're iridescent, right? So they are they're dependent on the light, the light that is shining on it to determine what the color is. So sometimes when you look at a ruby-throated hummingbird, if the light hits it right and that gorget just absolutely glows like a little jewel. And sometimes, as it is in this bird, when the light is not in the right place, it looks black or dark. But you can clearly tell that it is a different color than the crown of the bird, the top of the bird's head, which is that sort of deep emerald green of that the ruby-throated hummingbird has throughout its head and all the way down its back.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about hummingbirds and the gorgets, well, the colors in general, but the gorgets in particular, is, as Nate was saying, that the color is the result of the actual structure of the feather. It's not pigment. And the color changes depending on the angle, the position of the viewer in relation to the light source, the sun.
Yep.
And hummingbirds can control this. They know how this works, and they can flare out the gorgets and move and purposely make it change color and become more intense. And they know how to use that, and it's really fantastic to see it when they do that.
Another thing to note as well is that birds see in color spectrums that humans cannot see.
Correct.
So imagine what that gorget looks like in the ultraviolet spectrum, or are adding the ultraviolet spectrum to the visible light spectrum.
Yeah.
To see what it would look like to a female hummingbird. It's probably pretty spectacular.
Yeah. And it's spectacular to us. So yeah, exactly. Redbeard Birding asks, what's the best way to age bald eagles since it takes them a few years to get their iconic look? Well,
it does indeed.
I would say, you start with just an overall brown bird. It's just brown. Now David Sibley, all the field guides illustrate this pretty well. I think Sibley does a really good job of it. But they just generally, over the course of 5 years, come into that pattern. So, the second year, there's a little more white, splotchy all over the bird, especially on the head. And then the third year, they kind of get this weird osprey-looking kind of effect with an eye line, a dark eye line, and whitish crown and whitish throat. And then generally just progress through into year 5 when they become the iconic look you mentioned.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I am probably a kind of a lazy birder when it comes to aging bald eagles. I will age the adults, I will age the first years, and if it's any time in between, I'm like, yeah, one of those.
Me too.
Three sounds good. Maybe there are 3.
Yeah,
that's about as far as I'll go. I'm sure some people are very interested in it, but it is not my thing.
Oh, here's a fun one from Minnesota.
One. Yeah.
So we can tell again how big this bird is by the feeders it's perching on. This is a bird that shows up commonly. I just noticed that I just barely clipped the end of this bird's tail with the but this bird's tail ends at that black
more or less,
field that I threw over it by accident there, because the tail is something I wanted to talk about here. But when these birds show up at feeders in this plumage, people get excited because it's not something you see all that often. And
shall we bring it to family first?
Go right ahead.
All right. So we've been talking a lot about medium-sized to small yellow birds in this group. I don't know if that's intentional, but there's a lot of those moving around right now.
Yep.
So you might be justified to think that this is perhaps in that warbler Vireo area, but there's a few things you want to take a look at. We talk a lot about size and structure and appearance, just impression when we're identifying birds. And this is a great way to think about this, because it is a small bird that's mostly yellow with 2 wing bars and a dark bill. And you might think, oh, this is like the yellow warbler, or this is like the ruby-crowned kinglet. But no, it's not really shaped like those birds. So the first thing that stands out to me is this very lithe appearance, the very kind of slender, long, lanky appearance of this bird. It looks like it's got a very long tail, especially compared to relatively short wings. It's got a bicolored bill that's sort of hefty, but still quite long. And if you look at your field guides, you will find that the birds that have that appearance are blackbirds in the blackbird family, and they are specifically the Orioles. So this is one of the Orioles.
And again, remembering back to the kinglet and the warbler that we were looking at earlier, look at how strong these legs are. This bird has strong feet, strong legs. The bill is kind of hefty. It's kind of interestingly two-toned. That's not the light. That's not lighting. That bird actually has a gray lower mandible and a black upper mandible.
Kind of curved on the top.
Yep. And there's a couple 2-3 Orioles that have this black face like this, and the 2 in particular, Orchard Oriole and Hooded Oriole. And the person who posted this asked if it might be a Hooded Oriole, I believe, or somebody did at some point. And again, status and distribution. Minnesota, not going to find a Hooded Oriole in Minnesota. I believe it has occurred. But very rarely.
Surprise me if it's occurred. Very rare. Yeah.
Extremely rarely. This is a really good picture, so we can see a couple of other things that give this away. Now, again, excuse me, because I cut off the tip of the tail there, but a Hooded Oriole has a longer tail. It's a longer bird. It has a longer bill. It has a longer tail.
The tail is almost kind of pendulous too.
It's graduated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But now we can also see right at the base of that black bib and throat there, you see the chestnut of the male orchard oriole just beginning to come in, and this is a first-year male orchard oriole.
Confusing bird. They look very different from the adult males, which we think of as the the kind of brick red birds with the dark black bill. They almost look all black all over in the right light because that brick red is so dark. And also the females, which would not have any black at all on the face. They would just be kind of
very
warbler-like and greeny. Yeah, they do look like a stretched out warbler. Yep. Yeah,
and what's interesting about
an Oriole.
What's interesting about these first-year birds, and there's a number of passerines that in their first-year males look very different from adult males. I'm thinking, painted bunting is one, orioles are another, where these birds, the first-year males, get up and they sing, they have territories, and they're really confusing because they're acting like this is the final adult male plumage, and it's not.
It's not. Yeah, hooded orioles. I'm sorry. Orchard oriole are notorious for this sort of confusing plumage, but I will say it is well illustrated in most field guides.
Yes.
It's just a matter of noting that it is there. Now, if this photo were taken in, say, Southern California, Arizona, for starters, the grass would not be nearly as green, but imagine like a desert xeric background on this bird. Then we would have to look at it and consider a hooded oriole. But generally, hooded orioles are not this sort of green. Even young males tend to be much more yellowy orange than this bird is. So this combination of mostly all over green and the black mask is definitely another thing to think of in terms of orchard oriole. Len Kopka asked, can they mate at this age?
I believe so.
I think they probably can, but I don't know if any females are particularly interested in mating with them because they don't look as nice as the adult males.
But they do try.
I'm sure they try.
Yeah. A for effort. Alex Cruz asked, would hooded have the greenish upper parts? Well, it tends to be grayish, and again, here we're looking at a bird that's photographed obviously under the shade of a tree. There's the lights being filtered. It's really kind of subjective. I mean, hooded is grayer, not quite as greeny yellow, but again, that can be subjective. Len Kopka says he's seen a lucky first-year male that mated.
Imagine it doesn't happen very often, but it certainly does happen, I guess.
Yeah. But, if you put the two side by side, and I apologize, I didn't have time to do my usual comparisons that I try to get in here this afternoon. And if you put the two side by side, the structure is really the thing that stands out. They just look like two different birds, even though they look pretty darn similar.
Funnily enough, we had a hooded oriole in North Carolina a few years ago that showed up at a feeder, and it was, when you're thinking of vagrant hooded orioles, they tend to show up when a lot of other vagrants do. So we're talking about birds that are in October, November.
November.
November, when most of the orchard orioles have already, left for the year. There aren't very many hanging around. And even at that point, then I'd say that you're probably equally likely, even in a place like Minnesota, to have hooded versus orchard if you see a bird like this, and you need to be just really careful about the identification and make sure you're getting it right. But this time of year, perfect time of year for a orchard oriole to show up anywhere, east of the Rockies. So. That's status and distribution.
And I think that's it for our birds today. We've got a few minutes left here, so if you guys have anything you want to talk about while we're waiting on you, I would like to say that if you enjoy what we do, if you enjoy the greatest natural history podcast that there is, the ABA podcast hosted by that guy right there.
Not according to Apple Podcast rankings. They like
they don't know what the heck. They don't know what they're
animals attacking.
If you enjoy the What's This Bird group and the other things that we do, hit the join button.
Please consider joining the ABA.
Be a stakeholder. Be a part of what we're doing, and join the ABA. You can join and get access to everything we do for a cup of coffee a month, $2.50 a month,
and we
for
have
a digital membership.
Actually, I've already announced it, so we can say it again.
What's that?
Can we talk about the archive?
Sure, go ahead.
I talked about it on the website. It's I don't think it's quite ready for prime time yet, but it will be very
Oh, it's there.
shortly.
No, it's there.
Well,
It's up. Yeah.
look, people. One of the things that people have been asking us at the ABA for a very long time is what happens to all those great old articles that have been published in Birding Magazine. If we don't have the copy of Birding Magazine, there's no way we can have those old articles. Well, we have got news for you. Thanks to a massive effort from a lot of volunteers and, of course, Greg right over here, we have the entire run of Birding Magazine going all the way back to 1969. Every issue is available for members online. You've got like a great article that you've enjoyed a long time ago that you want to remind yourself of, things like impet identification, things like dowitchers, things like I don't know. The ABA Birding Magazine has had difficult identifications has been a huge part of the ABA's magazines for as long as we've been doing them. Also, there's great articles about where to find birds, how to bird different areas. All that stuff is available to members. All the magazines, not even just Birding Magazine, but some of the other stuff as well, like old issues of Winging It and
the Young Birder publication, which is now escaping. Which is escaping my.
No, it's
no. That was the blog.
Bird's Eye View.
Bird's Eye View. Thank you. Bird's Eye View.
Back when I was a young birder. All that stuff is available online. We've turned it all into PDFs and put it up. It's all searchable. You can find whatever you want in there. It's an amazing resource, and honestly I think like ABA membership is worth it just for that. So
yep. And if you are a member. If you are a member, you can find that right now under the members pull down, and on the menu on our website, you'll see publication archives and links to all of them.
Please check it out.
Log in and check them out.
Oh, I do have a question. I Am Become Seth on YouTube says, just saw my first Oklahoma caracara the other day. Any thoughts on where and when they are most likely to be expanding their range? That's a good question. That is a species that has, if not all that long ago, there were a ton of little wandering individuals all over the eastern part of the U.S. and into Atlantic Canada. I think they would be moving north into the Great Plains for the most part, and then from there, kind of continuing to be a vagrant east of the Mississippi, but maybe a more common vagrant. But if I were to put money on where caracaras are going to become regular, I would say Kansas, western Missouri, eastern Colorado,
Oklahoma,
all the way up. Yeah, all the way up into the Dakotas. I mean, that is a species that's probably ready to burst out at any moment.
Yeah, I would kind of look at the current range map of great-tailed grackle for
there you go.
Sort of an idea of where that species may
whistling
wind
duck.
up in 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, that's definitely a bird that is really good at taking advantage of novel situations and novel habitats. It's a bird that would do well in a warming world, honestly. Redbeard Birding says, I'd love to get better identifying sparrows with the naked eye. I guarantee there's some sparrow articles in our archives, Greg.
I know it.
He knows it.
Having spent months looking at all those magazines, getting that stuff together, I know it.
Alex Cruz says, was curious about the Fulmar, saw southern in Chile, not sure how to differentiate or if southern stray north like skuas. If they did, I don't know if we'd know it. Is there a way to identify southern Fulmar from northern Fulmar, Greg? Do you know?
That's something I can't just pull out of my head randomly right now. Alvaro Jaramillo could, but I'm not Al at the moment. And I don't have the reference material handy to answer that question. So
I have a copy of Birds of Argentina right next to me. Let me see if there's anything in there. I don't know how in-depth that would be. Southern Fulmar. I'm looking at the Fulmar. They look a little different. Actually, the illustrations are not very good in this book. But I imagine that there are some things that you would be able to tell. And someone like Al would probably be well-versed in identifying one if you were to see one. But I don't know. It's one of those things where people don't realize they need to start paying attention to the differences in those birds until they are right in front of you. It's like the willow alder flycatcher situation. Like, 30, 40 years ago when willow and alder flycatcher were only just recently split, people were like, oh, there's no way that these birds can be identified. when they're not singing. But now we know that there are ways to do that. It's not easy, but you can do it. And, you know, people start paying attention to that stuff when they have to.
Well, we are right up on the hour.
We did it.
Thank you all for chiming in. We again, if you like what we do here, come on, join the club. Right there.
Yep, aba.org/join. Thanks everybody for joining us. Check us out. Subscribe to the podcast. We'll be back in a couple weeks. If not, maybe we will. I'm actually gonna be out of town, but we'll see what we can do. Maybe it'll be Ted. Maybe we'll get Ted to do it.
He's been really busy lately.
He's been really